Hi, everyone. This is Jason Burek of Wall Street for Main Street. Welcome back to another Wall Street for Main Street podcast interview. Today's special guest is a first-time guest, but he's a good friend of mine for a number of years, and that is Peter Spina of GoldSeek. So thank you, Peter, for joining us on a podcast.
Hi, Jason. Thanks for having me on.
Now, Peter, let's talk about your background because you have a really interesting background. And for our listeners who are not familiar with the GoldSeek website, you were one of the very first gold websites on the internet. So how did you get the website up? What year did you put it up? And what got you interested in gold from your background?
Sure. I guess I'll start off with the gold side. I started off investing in my early teens, and quickly that turned into investing into gold. My parents' background are they're immigrants from the former Czechoslovakia, and escaped a communist country. And with that, they brought some of their insights and perspectives on real money and free markets and all that, how it kind of comes together with gold there. And so that was a big influence, and that combined with the fact that gold was trading at $300 to $400 an ounce at that time, and there being a very strong value proposition with a lot of the mines shutting down at that time, that it would be a good place to invest, especially with deficits starting to grow and problems just compared to where they are today look almost funny or not even a issue, but they started to start growing back then. And with the internet coming around, I was interested in computers and programming and just in general what the internet was starting to do as an opportunity to share information and so on. So I started 3 websites. One of them was a gold website, and I was able to apply my interest with the internet, investing, gold, precious metals into, it was called the Golden Page, but then became goldseek.com in the late 90s. So that site started back in, I believe it was August of 1995. And since then, we've grown it to be one of the most visited gold websites. And our focus is for just providing a platform for exchange of ideas and opinions. We found that even in today's market, even though gold is demonstrated, that is no longer a barbaric metal. Mainstream media continues to not understand the system the way that we view it as. And so the idea, same thing with what you're doing as well, is providing that's the opportunity for people to get information out there where the mainstream media wasn't allowing it to happen. So it's a very powerful thing, and I think, in fact, if you probably were to look at the development of the gold bull market, I think the internet has been a huge opportunity, a huge contributor to getting that information out there. I don't know if it would have developed as quickly as it has.
Yeah, I definitely agree, because you have all the information sharing going on, like the tutorials and the lecture videos and the useful books from Mises.org that people can get and learn about the Austrian School of Economics. They can download entire books for free and share them with all their friends. And then you have all these podcasts that are Austro-libertarian or gold-related. So I just think that's great. But yeah, in terms of talking about the technology revolution, during that time, internet stocks, they just had a website name, right? They were like pets.com or toys.com. They didn't have any revenue. They didn't have any earnings. They didn't have a business plan, right? And these stocks, some of them were going from under $1 to like $100. And, people that had bought, that at the bottom for some of these stocks and rode them all the way up, they were looking to get out, cash out, and find something more undervalued. And that's what led them to gold. And then you just saw what the misallocations of capital, right? And these companies were getting funded that shouldn't have gotten funded. I mean, someone who doesn't even have a business plan probably shouldn't get any funding, right? And obviously there was going to be repercussions in the markets for this eventually.
Absolutely. It's you see that even in the gold industry recently with in a couple, 2-3 years ago, maybe 4 years ago now, when exploration capital was just flowing into exploration projects and development projects, and all the focus back then was how many ounces can you add onto your books, how many millions of ounces do you have, not really regarding the economics behind the ounce, the grades and all the other components that goes into making these properties viable or not viable. So
it's a very good point. And some of these companies, like you said, they would just buy really old deposits that, were out in the middle of nowhere. They had no infrastructure. They didn't even have any pre-feasibility stuff done, and they were not economic even at 1,500 gold or 2,000 gold. And, they were all ounces are not created equal. So it's about, how economically can we pull those ounces out. And the miners are learning that the hard way. I've been saying this for a number of years, telling people to get out of the junior explorers because, most of them just are not economic at these prices.
Yeah, and they're the ones that do have good projects, unfortunately, are getting hurt too, but the ones that have been able to adapt, you kind of see which the market is differentiating the good from the bad, even though the good companies are being affected as well. But there's companies with the right business models like prospect generators and exploration that can survive and maintain a decent share structure, and others who have resorted to finding other ways to generate cash flow or access to capital. So it's interesting to see how the market is forcing companies to reinvent themselves or forcing them to change.
Yeah, I agree, because the cost of capital now is very high, and people are not getting a lot of capital. Like I heard Rick Roll give a presentation. I watched some of the Cambridge House videos, and he was talking about how there's not been that capitulation point where even the best juniors, who know they have a good deposit are not willing to give fair market terms for their stuff. They're still holding out for better terms. So you're starting to see the takeovers now from the larger guys, like Primero bought Brigas, which I think was a really smart deal for Primero. And, Goldcorp put in a hostile takeover bid for a Cisco. They're getting a pretty good deal on that if they end up acquiring it. Mm-hmm. So you're starting to see the bottom in the sector.
Yeah, it seems like the second and we have stability, and just even if gold can maintain these levels or silver, you'll have companies starting to make moves. But I did a panel with Rick Roll at the Vancouver conference, and he was saying as well that there's a lot of sources of new capital. They just did a deal with Sprott, did a deal with, I believe they were South Koreans, several $100 million of new capital there. There's all these funds with $1 billion here, $1 billion there that are starting to come back into the sector. So it's interesting to see now the value investors coming in. But like you said, it's hard to do deals when you have two greedy parties who are not very interested in the shareholders' interest, but their own interest in maintaining a salary and keeping their the positions alive. And I feel like that's a big problem, and especially in the exploration sector, they don't understand the investor's interest, the shareholder, what makes an investor in their company, and they tend to kill themselves off and not. Times are tough, and they got to start making deals and start figuring ways to make sure the property doesn't, company doesn't go bankrupt or lose a property or whatnot. So,
I completely agree. And there was one company that didn't do that. You have Colossus Minerals who didn't do that. Now they're going bankrupt and being restructured. But there's a whole bunch of other ones where, like you said, the CEOs of these juniors, they're paying themselves exorbitant salaries. They're staying in 5-star hotels and the suites. They were flying first class every single conference they went to. Their company wasn't making any money. They weren't putting the money into the ground, and they weren't doing their shareholders right. And if you're an entrepreneur and you want to grow your business, if you're Nolan Watson, has, for an example of this, Nolan Watson, I think his Sandstorm Gold's worth over $400 million market cap, and I think the guy still flies coach most of the time.
I see the same thing too. Traveling, I notice I do quite a bit of traveling between Denver, Vancouver, Mexico, other major hubs in the U.S., and you see people in this industry traveling, and a lot of times you do see the exploration guys sitting up front, and the producers. I've seen a couple mining guys with $500 million, $1 billion+ market cap sitting in coach. So it's interesting, and those are the companies, the guys who are the true. The real winners in the end, they're the shareholders in the companies too. They're owner management, not the caretaker management types. So it's a good thing to know when you're investing in companies. Where are their interests?
Yeah, that's a good indicator, because the SG&A expense is going to be too high. So I think it's an indicator that they're going to run things efficiently. Now, Peter, let's go back, because you mentioned earlier about your parents' background and where you're from. Let's just talk about the U.S. in general. Do you think the U.S. is rapidly becoming like a European socialist country, or do you think we're something much worse?
Yeah, there's a combination of things. I think economically, the Keynesian mentality, the socialistic views, and the the way the economy's kind of handled, that's one thing, but also just how the government is now civil liberties wise, privacy wise, we're losing a lot of these things that made this country so great, which attracted people like my parents willing to escape from their homeland to come to a wonderful country which offered them so many opportunities, and still remains, a great country, but it's transforming, and it's interesting to see the similarities of what, say, my parents were talking back about under this communist regime, this totalitarianism, and what's starting to transpire here. A lot of similarities taking place. So it's disturbing when you see that, especially if you're the world's superpower, and you should be leading by example. And I don't think that's happening. So there's a lot of things like on that level that come into play.
It depends what you're leading on example by, because, if they're going to spend all this money, on military and spying technology, I don't want them leading by example, you know what I'm saying? I want them to leave me alone.
It's sad. It's so much waste of money that could be used, better use, including not taking it from the productive when people should have as much choice with the money that they earn instead of giving it away to the bureaucracy and to the empire and supporting things that you don't even support yourself. I don't know what's going to happen with all that, because it seems that on one hand you have the younger generation who's starting to see through this and wants change and gets what's going on, and with that free flow of information, it's kind of getting out there. But on the other hand, the system is so large, and it's how do you change something that's so ingrained in such a deep level? So maybe it is in the end just a big economic collapse is a way to clean out the house.
Well, yeah, we should have had a collapse, right? We should have had free market forces. We should have had this big wipeout, but they just keep printing more money to maintain the status quo at larger and larger costs to the future. And then, you have these baby boomers, right? And they're the ones who vote more than our generation does. Mm-hmm. And, they don't want their standard of living to drop. So they don't, they see that they put all the money in from all their years of work into the Social Security system, but then when they go on Social Security, right, they end up taking out more money than they put in. Everyone does.
And right? And with their pensions and all these things very minimal, they are sitting on a lot of equity holdings and other assets, trillions and trillions of dollars worth, so they're going to have to start selling those off too to support themselves, and that's a whole different topic. But
Wall Street and the Fed can buy them with leverage.
Yeah.
free money.
Free money.
So that's what I think the baby boomers are selling. And you've had these deflationists and demographics people like Harry Dent mm-hmm. and Danielle Park, routinely say, eventually demographics, they're going to sell assets, but you just have 0% interest rates, right? Essentially for the people on Wall Street, and they could just go in and they're buying up all the assets. So the more that the people on Main Street are dumping their assets, just to survive and pay their bills and stuff like that, the more that, the people at the top just keep getting more and more of the assets.
It's a huge transfer of wealth mechanism. It's amazing. It's just happening in front of our eyes, and people are still not, they're not on the streets revolting like you see in other parts of the world, but it may come down to that if this keeps going the way it is.
Yeah, I think we're on our way there, but I think there's just not enough people who have woken up yet. And, the people who have woken up that are in our generation, because I think, Peter, you're on my age, I'm 31, like people in our generation, like they're either kind of like on Occupy, or they don't want to, they still believe in the system, or they're libertarian. It's kind of like those are the three categories. Mm-hmm. And the people that like believe in the system or in Occupy, they don't agree with really anything we say, and they think we're just conspiracy theorists because, they haven't read Creature from Jekyll Island. They haven't even read our argument, really. They've read our argument on the Huffington Post. Yeah. They've read one, smash job about one libertarian author on the Huffington Post, and they've just dismissed any of our arguments.
Yeah. They're not as open-minded, unfortunately, and it's always important to have. Their misconceptions are quite off, but yeah, we'll see how it develops in economics, and all this changes things very quickly, and you never know what comes out of left field, like Bitcoin recently, and how that changes the ball game.
Now, being since you brought up Bitcoin, I did want to ask you about Bitcoin. What is your opinion of Bitcoin then? Do you think then that it's gold 2.0? Do you not like Bitcoin like Peter Schiff, or do you think that Bitcoin is like good insurance to, in addition to holding gold and silver? Because we don't know what the government's going to do, with the rules. If they're going to change the rules for gold or silver, if Bitcoin's going to be easier, to leave the country with or something like that.
Yeah, any form of capital controls is happening. They've raised taxes on gold, all parts of the different world, because they want to prevent people from buying gold and silver. And it looks like now they're starting to attack Bitcoin. But I guess the way I see it is it's good in that it's making people question what money is in ways that gold and silver haven't been able to on that level. It's amazing to watch a Bloomberg or whoever mainstream media talk about Bitcoin and makes them trying to understand what Bitcoin is. In that process, they start questioning what money is, and you start realizing the similarities between the dollar and Bitcoin. But then you start saying that, well, maybe Bitcoin is better than the dollar because of this, and that. But still, in the end, it's not tangible. It's something that I don't trust on the level where I can trust a gold or silver coin in my hands. So I still believe that gold and silver is the ultimate currency, store of wealth, but maybe Bitcoin has the future and as a transactional currency and so on. But it's going to have a big, and I think this is the start of it here. You saw with the news, I think it was yesterday, where they arrested one of the Bitcoin exchanges for transmitting an unauthorized lending money transfer service or whatnot, money laundering. So they're going to do it all within their power to try to control it. I don't know, if Bitcoin can work through those challenges or not, but the market really demands and wants something else, and the free market should be able to experiment in other currencies and monies and whatnot. And it's interesting to kind of see how sensitive and how reactionary some of these central authorities are, and it shows you that what they really want to do is preserve their own power structure and control over money, and how important that is to the overall power schemes. So
yeah, those are good points, and I think like the people that are in power, the economic and political elites, the people running central banks and stuff like that, they want a cashless society. So they don't want an underground economy where people are using cash, not reporting how much extra income they make, or, transactions like in Europe, the transactions are purchases to escape the VAT tax, right? Mm-hmm. People pay with cash under the table, right? Or get paid under the table so they don't have to pay the VAT tax. So they want a type of technology-based money or whatever, because even, a debit card and stuff is cashless society, right? If you're just using your debit card, so there's a transactional history there. But I think Bitcoin is a really nice piece of technology. I think it's really cool, all the technology that's going into it. I don't think it's money, obviously, because it hasn't proven that it's stored value for many years. But, it's definitely a medium of exchange, and more people are starting to accept it. So it probably has a future as a currency. And, I think it's a very interesting complement to gold or silver, but, obviously if you put all your money into Bitcoin the last year, you made a lot of money as a speculator, but I would be very scared having all my money in Bitcoin, let me put it that way.
I would too. Like you said, speculation, I think it's good for speculative, maybe just a little bit more, but my own adventure into has been speculative as well.
Yeah, I think it's a really good complement to physical gold and silver holdings for a lot of reasons. Just I like technology stuff too, so I think it's a really interesting technology, and it's really good that there's a lot of other programmers that are putting in all this extra time to improve the code and encrypt it more and stuff like that. And I think that's what's protected Bitcoin from actually being destroyed already, is that so many people have time and money invested in Bitcoin to protect it.
Yeah, I wish them the best. Why force people to use U.S. dollars or other currencies? But we know why. The game.
I'm all about competing currencies. I don't know about you, but like more than a gold standard, I would prefer competing currencies. So let gold or silver like duke it out in the marketplace with Bitcoin and dollars and euros and all these other things, and let the market decide. But I don't think the people in power are going to allow that, unfortunately.
Absolutely.
Okay, well, Peter, you go on a lot of, let's switch gears here. You go on a lot of site visits. This is something that a lot of other people don't actually do. So you put your boots on the ground. So please tell our listeners about some of the mines you've been to recently, and then maybe talk about if you see any of the problems like in Mexico that some of the people are hearing about, like violence or taxes, and how are the miners doing with dealing with the lower metal costs and the rising prices. Are the miners you visited, have they been able to, lower their costs and fix things so they're making a profit now?
Yeah, I think that's one thing with the pullback in prices. We've seen miners having to adapt to it, having to force some difficult changes and become more efficient, so on, and reducing expenditures. So you're starting to see lower production costs, and I think that will be a trend coming up for this year. I've been I do quite a few site visits. Mexico has been a place where I've been to 20 or 30 times that I view as one of the most mining-friendly areas. For the last several years has been kind of our most of our investment focus. It was unfortunate that this new tax was passed with a bit of a royalty on it. I think that what happens, it takes Mexico from a very competitive advantage point to more just a competitive, more in the not sticking out like
slight a downgrade. You mean slight downgrade to a little bit ahead of the pack instead of way ahead of the pack. You would say that?
Yeah, I still think if you look at the overall production costs, the time it takes to get things into production there and different advantages of being in Mexico. I did a silver mining in Mexico panel with 3 CEOs, Endeavor Silver, Silvercrest, and Santa Cruz Silver, and got some of their opinions as well on the situation. And they look at Mexico like Nevada was 30, 40 years ago. They had all these restrictions on foreign capital and investments until about 20 years ago. And that really opened up all this exploration and development, and there's a lot of opportunities still there to develop. And it's been a very beneficial aspect to developing, especially rural parts of Mexico. So like on the mine tours I usually go to, they're in places where you may have a small community of hundreds of thousands of people with maybe agricultural or very whatever kind of economy going on there, very few opportunities. So then the mine comes in and revives the area, and it gives opportunities and higher incomes and investment to the area. So
and roads and electricities and schools, and this is something that people just don't talk about, is that the miners now are putting in these things that the community would not have had. They're investing in the community and upgrading a lot of the infrastructure and educating people so they have a better workforce and stuff like that.
Yeah, and the social impact, the economic impact, those are all in many different ways. It's known, and I know that I believe that the Mexican government knows that they can't keep, they won't keep coming after them for more and more and more, or else they'll push all this capital away. It's a competitive world, and there's other parts of South America and the world that money will flow to if they make it a difficult place to operate. And Mexico still is fine. Where Fortuna Silver is down in southern Mexico, Oaxaca, the village that they're by, they employ several hundred people. Most of them in the local community there. They give a lot of women opportunities for employment, and eventually for their children for education and so on. Those jobs provide a lot of different benefits as well. It doesn't really talked about, but as far as investing goes, I think Mexico for investors, most of what happened has been priced in with the tax situation. So I think at this point, that for the most part is being figured out. I think once you get a couple quarters underneath the belt here in 2014, you'll see the exact impact on the numbers. How much tax are they really paying in the end? Is it about 40% or so, or whatnot? But the site visits are very helpful to see the operations and how the companies operate locally, and get insights on the mine and on the companies. So I do like to get down to Mexico and other parts of the world. Sorry, your other questions I think were related to the site visits, Jason.
Oh, they were about production costs. So are the miners still focusing on production costs and lowering them,
okay,
or have they basically high graded their deposits to the point where they've lowered all the costs that they can lower, and this is we're going to risk going bankrupt for a number of the miners here if the metals prices go lower.
Well, it depends on the mine. Some of them can have they can put some more focus on the higher grade zones and stop mining lower grade and focus more on efficiencies and getting higher margins on the ore there. I think a lot of the companies have reduced their exploration budgets. There's a lot of probably a huge pullback on exploration and other development projects. So they're just being a lot more conservative with their cash, which means also that the future development of resources has been slowed down. So when the bull market comes back, you're going to have a big lag time in expanding deposits or discovering new deposits and putting them into production. So from the
sounds like a supply shock to me too, setting up over the next 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
Where demand is obviously, I think, still rising for gold and silver, and now supply, because of the problems that the miners have had, and you mentioned some of them, that the miners are going to be very hesitant to increase production going forward.
And we had a shock in 08, 09 there, and then it's roared back, but very quickly. And you look at the gold silver stocks, really the last 3 years we've been in this consolidation downtrend, maybe a bit longer now. It's been very difficult, and you're seeing a whole kind of different sector that's being transformed into right now. So it'll be interesting. I think it'll be a lot more investor friendly, which is something that the industry needed because it was very inefficient with the use of capital.
Yeah, I agree. And now we're also starting to see, the German government is starting to look into precious metals manipulation. I think one of the German financial regulators said the precious metals market is more manipulated than the LIBOR market was.
Mm-hmm.
So we're starting to see, signs of a bottom and people looking at some of the facts that people like you and I have looked at for years and said, this is obvious. And we're starting to see the mainstream come around to it.
Absolutely, there's some big news stories out there in the gold market. I think the German financial regulator, his opinion on the gold fixing and the manipulation is pretty big. We have leverage of over 100 to 1 on the paper versus physical gold market on the COMEX. At some point, this is not going to end well, and I think that's why China and other parts of the world there continue to add gold and aggressively will do so when they can here. But if any point that it comes out that the gold sitting in the U.S. has got other claims on it or is not there, and you have other countries with their gold that's supposed to be safely deposited is not available, how is Germany going to react if it's true that a lot of their gold is not available in the U.S.? It's very suspicious what's going on there right now. I don't know.
I think the gold's gone.
Yeah.
I think the gold's long gone. I mean, I don't know if you heard the Jim Woolley talk about it recently, but they kept reclassifying what they called the reserves. So it went from regular gold reserves to something else. I forgot what it was called. To custodial account custodial account gold, and then to long deep storage or something like that. Not even know what that means.
They did the same thing with the Treasury Department. Did that like 10, 15 years ago. They eventually it turned into deep storage gold somewhere.
I'm thinking China and the Middle East have most of the gold already.
It'll be interesting to see how it plays out, but it's looking like we may have hit a bottom. If not, it's not too far away. I think there's more risk to the upside on the price than it is to the downside.
You mean reward?
Yeah.
Reward than risk?
Yeah. Well, there's a risk if you're short, let's say.
Oh yeah. Yeah, I think the trend traders on Wall Street who normally hate gold but have been, looking at the chart and shorting it for thinking it's easy money for the last 2 or 3 years. I've spoken with a good amount of regular mainstream hedge fund managers like on Seeking Alpha and stuff, guys who worked at JP Morgan and, went to Ivy League schools, and they're like, oh, gold's going to 600 and all the miners are going bankrupt. And I'm like, do you even look at the reality supply-demand fundamentals? And they're like, no, I only care about the chart. So they don't have a clue about the supply-demand fundamentals. They don't know anything about, what the refiners in Switzerland are doing, how they're running overtime, right? Or how China has, I think they've imported, over 2,000 tons of physical gold, according to Kuz Jansen of In Gold We Trust, just in the last 12 months. So that's what 100% of annual mine supply. It's insanely high figure.
It's incredible. Then when they eventually get the won-backed gold currency floated on an international scale and start to threaten the U.S. dollars and the euro's supremacy, that's another problem for the dollar. So that's.
So you expect then China to go to a gold standard? I think they're just doing that to hedge their treasury holdings.
Yeah.
And yeah, I don't know if they want a free floating currency anytime soon.
No, I don't think it'll be right away, but they're not week to week, year to year thinkers. They're long term. This is a long term goal for them, and it's a process which they seem to be working through. And I don't know. I don't fully agree that it'll be a convertible gold yuan currency, but that backing is going to be important to bring trust and give integrity.
I think they want to bring like the commodities markets to China, like a lot of the oil. I think they want to eliminate the petrodollar and move a lot of the oil trading over to China because they're the largest importer now of oil in the world, not the U.S. anymore. Now that the U.S. has shale oil, so I mean China wants to move a lot of the capital markets over to China. And it'll be really interesting to see how things play out. Hopefully we don't go to a war or something like that. But yeah, I think it all starts with gold because I think they know that their treasury holdings are going to get massively devalued, and they're buying real assets like crazy still.
That's you can't blame them.
Okay, well, Peter, let's wrap up this interview. Just want to thank you for your time, and please tell our listeners more about GoldSeek, although you already told them some, but tell them more about GoldSeek and SilverSeek and any other newsletters or stuff you have for sale.
Sure, we're goldseek.com and silverseek.com, so we have latest news and information on the markets. I contribute to the gold and silverforecaster.com, and we're just in the process of getting our GoldSeek mint going out of Texas, so that'll be something we'll be talking more about in the next months. Yeah.
Nice, and you also have GoldSeek Radio with Chris Walczak that you help, and then are you still doing Uranium Seek or?
Yes, we do cover uranium, but not as actively. I think it's starting to get closer to the point where it becomes a lot more interesting opportunity. Last few years we're kind of thinking around 2015. At some point we'll look more into that, but our main focus is gold and silver, and yeah, we'll watch some of these other markets and see what happens. Eventually, commodities will be interesting to us, but that might be 10 years down the road.
Oh, you mean the non-gold and silver commodities, the industrial ones?
Yeah, eventually, once this debt issue works itself out, I think there's a lot of opportunities in other metals, but the monetary metals just have such more opportunity in them right now. I would have a hard time being long copper when I can be long silver.
Yeah, I agree. I don't like copper very much, especially when China's just sticking it in a warehouse or doing central planning too and building entire cities.
Yeah.
Some of them that people don't even live in.
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you again for your time, Peter, for the great interview, and hopefully we can have you back on again soon.
Sure thing. Thanks, Jason. It's a pleasure speaking with you.